So welcome to today's event. I'm Jason Gumper from MSDynamicsWorld.com. I'm really pleased to be able to welcome Henry McCallum to present today. It's great to have Henry back with us. Today's session, as you know, is all about Common Data Service for Dynamics 365 and Dynamics CRM. Please know that as we move along here today, you can enter questions at any time. Look for the Q&A block to the right of the main presentation area. And I know Henry will be leaving time at the end to answer some questions. So without any further delay, Henry, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Great. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
We can.
So the point of today, we're going to be discussing the Microsoft Common Data Service and the Common Data Model. There's been a lot of talk and press and confusion, actually, I think a lot to do with most of the Common Data Model more than the Common Data Service or what it's all about. So hopefully after today's session we'll be able to understand a little better, but more importantly, hopefully we'll be able to walk away from this session with enough of an understanding to actually start utilizing it in our daily practices. And by utilizing it, I mean take the functionality and value that it provides and utilize some of the tools that we're already paying for as part of our Office 365 or Dynamics subscriptions, such as Flow and PowerBI and stuff like that, and actually take things to the new level. Get our data talking to our data and working through that. So let's just get started. What we're going to do today is we're going to kind of go over a little bit about what the Common Data Service is, and then its different components. There's a lot of confusion as to whether the Common Data Service is the Common Data Model and the Common Data Model is the Common Data Service. The Common Data Service is the whole umbrella of this new unification of services for the cloud and, at this point in time, on-premise. And then within that are components such as the Common Data Model and other items that we'll talk about. So just to make that clear, the Common Data Service is the umbrella and the Common Data Model is a component of that. So what we're going to do first is we'll touch on what the Common Data Service is all about. So what the Common Data Service is, and we can all read this here, is basically it's an Azure-based application and storage model that Microsoft has put together to provide for the ability to have, our different systems talk to each other in a more transparent manner, and actually taking the functionality of creating these integration points and these, data manipulation points out of the hands of, .NET developers and stuff like that, and really putting it in the hands of power users, and in some cases putting it in the hands of, system administrators who want to, quickly create and do certain things. The whole idea is that this is to utilize software as a service methodology such as workloads, and then combine that with different business suites. So we have our Office 365, we have our Dynamics for Financials, we have our Dynamics for field service, whatever it may be. As that becomes more and more of a clouded area with different verticals partitioned out, it's through the Common Data Service that we're going to be able to start to piece those things together and have one holistic environment. So we'll have one place where everything works together. For those of you who've been around for a long time, I'm sure we heard that many, many years ago. And slowly and surely it's coming to, it's getting closer to fruition. All right, so what is the Common Data Service? So the Common Data Service is a few things. What it does is it ties in those applications, the business suites, CRM, Dynamics AX, or Dynamics 365, whether it be on-premise or in the cloud, as well as a number of other tools by other vendors and publishers, and it gives us the ability to utilize that data and those processes within those separate applications by providing us with a service. And in that service, it provides for a security model. It provides us for import and export functionality. It also provides us with a data store for storing common data, and that's where we'll talk about the Common Data Model in a little bit. And that's where I think we need to spend some time because there's some confusion as to what that is and if it exists today. And then sitting on top of that is a consumable and publishable API that allows us to go out and take the simplified things that we may want to try and create with Flow or internal, Dynamics workflows or whatever, and take them to the next level by using the API to really do some development using .NET and other tools. All right. Microsoft has defined that there's three pillars of the common data service. It wants to make sure that the CDS is the focal point of your data. This is where we'll go to do anything with our data. So instead of going out and doing work in CRM, so we go out and write a web service or a plugin or something like that, to go and manipulate data in CRM, or we go out and do something within AX or another application, including the Office suite. We're going to actually start doing that through the common data service. And the reason we're going to do it that way is it's going to provide for our ability to maintain, reutilize, as well as upgrade those functionalities without having, the need to have break fixes created. The other focus of the pillars is the management of applications. So by utilizing the common data service as our point of entry or point of exit, shall we say, for any kind of custom or personalized applications and development we want to make, is that we're doing everything in one area. We're not doing a little bit in CRM, a little bit in AX, a little bit in here, and a little bit there, and then trying to tie it all together. We're doing it all within this service that's provided, and that service is then reaching out with its tentacles, or whatever we want to call it, and utilizing the functionality of those other applications. And then the bottom line is it works with the rest of Microsoft. That is a short-sighted statement by Microsoft, because the great thing about the Common Data Service is it is not just Microsoft. Microsoft has their own Common Data Service, but it's an industry thing that's going out everywhere. If you go to look at Oracle or anyone else, they're all talking about common data models and common data services, allowing their tools to have integration points to other tools. So by Microsoft saying that it works with the rest of Microsoft, that's easy. That's out of the box. We can click in our Office 365 and go to Power BI and go to Flow and PowerApps and all that stuff. But it's within those applications that we can actually go outside of Microsoft as well. We can go out to, hence we ever have to do this, Salesforce.com or whatever else we may want to do, and pull that all in by using the Common Data Service as the glue that holds that all together. All right. So the primary piece of the Common Data Service is what we've all heard about, which is the Common Data Model. Now, the Common Data Model is a concept that's been around for a long time, and what that is it's instead of us having data stored in independent databases, so we have an account in CRM, and we have an account in our AX product, or Dynamics for Financials and Dynamics 365, is why don't we just have one account record? That's been a long time in coming. Many people have talked about it, and that's one of the key things of almost every integration product, is pushing the same data from one system to another system and back and forth and make sure they maintain continuity. The goal of the Common Data Model is actually to take that there. And what it is it's actually a secure database that uses what they call well-formed business standard entities. So by that, Microsoft has spent the time to say, okay, we know what an account is. We know what a vendor is. We know what a constituent is. And if you look at the Common Data Model as it exists today, some of it doesn't make sense why they picked some of the things as the groupings. But what they've done is they've taken the common pieces of information and grouped them into containers, per se. That makes sense. We have an account container that exists. We have a container for products, product description, so on and so forth, that we can then take those pieces and build on them. This whole product is based on Azure, so when we talk to Common Data Model, we have to keep in mind that is not our internal or our old school Adaptability data store. It's not our CRM data store. The Common Data Model is a third or an external data store that takes the pieces of data, if we so choose, from these systems and puts them into a common area and keeps the synchronization of that data in check using internal policies and procedures. This is a rolled out process. Some of you may have seen within both the Dynamics CRM latest releases as well as AX in the data store, MSDYN _ field names. Those are the field names for fields that will exist in the Common Data Model or do exist. And the reason Microsoft is highlighting those with that prefix is to allow them to create automations that will keep the account name, MSDYN underscore account name in the CRM data store and the one in the exact data store in line with what's actually in the common data model. We'll talk about that a little bit further as to where it is. There's some things called behavior modeling and defaulting that are also provided as part of this thing, as a common data model. That provides us with the ability to set certain behavior models. So we want to know that whenever we add an account anywhere, it adds across the entire common data model. So we add an account in CRM, it puts it in AX, it puts it in, a third-party app, it creates a SharePoint workflow or SharePoint site as we need it externally, so forth. The other thing that the Common Data Service provides is a security model. Now, the security model there's two different methods. By default, when you implement the Common Data Service, it is open mode. By open mode, it means everyone can see everything based on their ability to log into your system. So any user at, longviewinc.com is going to be able to see every piece of information if I put the open security model in effect. All right. This provides the ability to create and share apps without having to worry about a security model. So it's kind of the lesser secure is more for right now. The additional security model that is provided by the system is what's called the restricted mode, and that's more that we're familiar with in CRM and other things. In restricted mode, you need to configure role-based security. So in this mode, you'll have to go and configure, much like in CRM, your security roles and access, as well as in the other products, GP and such, where you're used to creating your role-based security. In order to access the system, you need to have at least one role assigned when the security model is turned on. This is controlled automatically using the Azure Active Directory structure. So again, this is back to the Microsoft tying all of this together. So what we're using is not only our Common Data Service, but one of the pieces the Common Data Service uses is it uses Active Directory to control. All right. Another area that is pretty important is a common import and export model. So right now, by utilizing the Common Data Service, all of the products that are tying into this are slowly being built out on this model will have a common integration point. That is, like I mentioned before, the MSDYN underscore account name field. That is part of the integration import model. It knows by that field name that that account information is the same as it's the same structure, same shape, same size across all things that use that common data model field lever. The great thing is that by using this import model, there's a trusted connection that continually will synchronize data. I update information in GP or in a third-party app that I've created in a PowerApp. It will then go through and pull that information over and fill that, make sure that all of my data is in sync without me having to run any kind of third-party apps to do that. All right. Right now, the most common function of the import integration model is Microsoft Flow, which we'll look at the end of this session. It's a great little tool. Does some cool little things. It's got some little whiz bangs that right out of the box, if you've got it, you can start playing with right now to do, some interesting little things without any thought process at all, because there's lots of templates for it. All right. And then there's the unification model. So the unification model is a concept that allows for all information across the products and platforms in the Microsoft stack. So the unification model is Microsoft stack-centric to work under a common API. That is powerful for when we go and do any additional development. So the idea is that we're going to be able to use the Common Data Service, PowerApps, Flow, our applications, Dynamics 365, Office 365, Teams, whatever we may use, and create processes between those applications. When we need to get outside of our stack or the Microsoft stack, the unification model allows us to do things much easier. There'll be common code repositories and stuff like that that will allow development to occur much quicker but more importantly, the development will be able to be done in such a way that it's maintainable, modifiable, and has a maturity setting. It can continue to be built on. And here we're going to get into the detail of the common data model. So we talked about the different components and identified there's 5 of them, what we just went through. We're going to dig now deeper into each one of those. So we're going to start with the common data model because that is the most talked about. It's the one we've been hearing about for, honestly, for some of us in the industry for a decade now. We've heard about this thing that's coming with Microsoft's going to have one database. We are going to start seeing more and more of this play in part. If you've updated to Dynamics 365 for sales, or if you've put the latest version of the Dynamics 365 for financials out there, you'll notice that some of the common data model is starting to be integrated into a database. Again, I spoke earlier, MSDYN underscore field name indicates that that is a field that will be maintained as part of the common data model. It will be available through the import-export functionality of the common data service. It will be controlled by the common data service's security rules and other components of that system. So, common data model basically just provides us a bunch of standard entries. And again, I mentioned they don't always make sense to us. Sales, purchase, customer service, productivity. And this is based on Microsoft's experience and hopefully their partners and users' experience as well as to what groupings to put these in. Now, the great thing is those groupings are completely virtual joinings. We can take those and create our own as we move forward and the common data model matures. But they provided a number of them out of the box so that we can do things much easier. It's easier for us to be able to write a cross-platform or cross-application feature or tool that's going to know that a purchase order or an order in CRM has some relation similarity to the order field in AX or GP or whatever the other product is. All right. And again, this is all based on Azure. And one of the things that's used here is something called the Service Fabric and Elastic SQL. Really cool names. It reminds me of that, Elastic Girl and how they saved the world in that cartoon, about superheroes. But the great thing is because by this elasticity and this fabric concept is what they're saying is that we'll have our standard relationships and provide structure and stuff like that, but you're going to be able to create your own tapestry, for lack of a word. I'm going to use that line for no better reason, to create additional functionality as we go down the line. So for those old school IT people, we've probably heard of this canonical data model. So basically what that is the concept is that it's application independent. There's one data store, and this is not to be confused with a data warehouse or with a data lake, because this is actually a data store that's controlled and consumed as part of that service bus, that common data service. Data lakes, data warehouses can contribute data to this and may in fact actually use the common data model as its components or feeds, but it is not what this is designed to be at this point in time. That is not to say that for a smaller business, going to the common data model cannot actually afford the same benefits that you may see in a very light version of a data warehouse or data lake scenario. But again, it's all within the structure of the Microsoft environment. It does not give us a lot of ability to go out and, much like a data warehouse would let me pull in information from, external data stores and systems and so on and so forth. This is really all what's within the Microsoft stack and the Microsoft supported stack. And we'll look at those as we get into Flow and PowerApps later on. So what the common data model gives us is a number of things. The first thing it does is gives us structured metadata. By structured metadata, it's telling me that MSDYN underscore account name is going to have the same structure and definition, whether it be in Exapta, Dynamics for Financials, 365 Financials, Dynamics CRM, PowerApps, maybe an Office 365 flow application. It's always going to be the same structured data. The reason it's designed that way is that's going to allow me to do things that are, create pre-canned forms. It's going to let us do, data cleansing and cleaning up, knowing that the same data is going to exist across all of those entities or in the same structure. I don't have to go and second guess on some of the things. All right. Part of that definition is also the concept of behavior modeling. We can do such things as saying that a rule is that if we enter in the best company in the world, that the structure is the display name may show best company of the world, the best company in the world, but we're going to ignore the acronym or the preface term of the, whatever it may be in any of our searches or other things. We can build that logic into the system, and it's going to flow throughout all of those applications that use the common data service. That's a really key piece that the structured metadata, we've dealt with that for a long time, but this behavior modeling is something a little bit different and is new. Within that behavior modeling, it also gives us the ability to create defaulting. So we can, by default, say that all companies, whenever we enter a company name or a company that is in the District of Columbia, that we automatically have a state value of Washington fill in, or inverse that statement. I'm sorry. I live in D.C., so I'm always confused whether we're a state or not. The great thing is we can do things to do, auto numbering and stuff like that, so we don't have to go out and create these third-party apps to go and create an auto numbering for our opportunities to create, proposal IDs and stuff like that. As part of the common data model, that field can be created and utilized across all applications. All right. So rich data types is another area that it really supports more and more functionality. So there's always been this ongoing thing, slowly as CRM has expanded or moved forward in its maturity, as well as Great Plains and Solomon and Exapta, is we slowly start to see things such as the ability to handle more powerful data types. Right now, the common data model supports compound addresses, so we can type in 1006 48th Street, Washington, D.C., 20019, and it will know automatically to break out the city-state. That compound addressing logic is location-based, so if it knows that my installation is in the United States, it uses some common data logic, and that goes back to our last slide talking about the methods and stuff like that to take and handle that. The same thing goes for phone numbers and so on and so forth. It supports all of the standard SQL data types, Boolean, integer. Number sequencing is a new one that actually has come in there. This is very important. So this gives us the ability to, within the common data model, set up, I want to create up one proposal ID number scenario. I'm going to set that up in the common data model using the common data service, and I'm going to consume it in CRM, and I'm going to consume that within Exapta so that when I have a bidder, a proposal, and I send that proposal out through a proposal system that I've created that I'm maybe doing my quotes through the 365 for financials product, that same quote number controls the records that's related to across all of those items. And instead of having to maintain that through Scribe or another maintenance function, it's handled by the common data model and common data service. Some additional fields that are a little more specific now in the common data model. So there's always been some issue with date and time fields. The date and time fields are now been split into two different types. So we can actually just see the date portion of date fields when we're working on things. The email string storage has actually been increased. It used to be the logic was you had to have at something dot something. They've allowed for some more logic that handles a few more of the .gov, .info, .nyc type items. There is across all of these systems a global unique identifier, GUID. We've all heard that before. Number that is actually unique across all things. Much like the recent application products, there is the ability for primary and secondary keys. All right. We have lookups. We have multi-line text. It's all very similar to what we have, but there's some new compound ones. So we have personal name, the compound field that'll split out first name, last name. It actually does salutation as well now. There's some new functionality around the string, the ability to store URLs as well as URIs. So Skype or we can use URI references to call applications with data fields to link certain things like maybe a specific SMS package that we use to send a text message or something like that. All right. So there's the data constructs. One of the things the common data model does not do is for certain relations, they maintain the referential integrity between a contact below an account and so on and so forth. But for some data tables, it has been determined that it is actually easier to not normalize the data for access and storage than it is. And the common data models, data constructs rules actually allow for that. What this gives us the ability to create different containers or containment they call them. That's those groupings of data structures. So I may want to say that a prospect is a special kind of CDM unit that I want to have, that I want to use across many applications. I can create that myself. The other thing, besides data constructs, it allows for functionality and familiarity. A data construct would be the ability to, when I type in the best company in the world, an account name, if THE space is in the first, 4 characters of it, remove that and reformat the information to be, best company in the world, comma, the, at the end. There's some stuff built in automatically that can all be changed and modified. And once you modify something in the common data model, that exists for your data model, for your data structure. It exists as an additive event, so it does not break what's already there. It just takes what's already there and says, okay, that's what you do, but now we want to change it to do this, so that it doesn't at any point in time break anything. So we'll talk about that later. Everything in the common data service and common data model is additive. Whatever we do to modify something that's out of the box or base functionality does not replace what exists already. It sits on top of it or follows that, precedes it. So it does what it's supposed to do first, and then we give a new rule that says, that's nice, but I want it to say this. I want the to be put to the end of the word. That way, as we move forward and we upgrade systems and the systems mature, we don't break things that we've already got in place. The great thing about the common data model is, so our system attributes, our properties, type fields, versioning, owners, access, modification dates, and a bunch of other things that help us maintain our data integrity and auditing and other purposes are shared across the entire organization if we want, or can be isolated. So our system, we may not utilize the common data model for, say, record update information because we want to have a separate audit track in CRM and a separate audit track in our financial product. Or we can say we want to have across the board audit functionality where we track all record manipulation in our global system, that we can utilize the system attributes of the common data model to do that as well. Integrity. So declarative referential integrity is what Microsoft uses upon the data model, so no orphan data is left out. This is a SQL type function, and what it does is it utilizes child table, so it updates something to the child first and then pushes it back to the parents. So at any point in time, we don't have any issues where we lose data. So if I'm updating in a non-declarative environment, I may be updating a record in CRM, so I update the account name. The automation of the common data service and common data model would, in theory, my mind would say, okay, now I go and if I'm using another product like Scribe or something like that, it would then push that information to application X and then to application Y and so on and so forth. What happens is with a common data model, it writes anything that is shared across the common data service to a child table and then pushes from that child table to all those other entries at once if we've enabled the use of the common data service. And that's all based on the primary key or the key for the record. There's been a lot of testing done with that, and it seems to work quite well. For the security in the common data model, it is a role-based and entity-based security model, very similar to Dynamics CRM's CRUD. It is not the same exactly. There's a lot of talk that the consumable role-based security is something a little bit different and new, and there's probably great to do another session on this because it's going to be part of, the forthcoming virtual entities and OData consumption functions that CRM and Dynamics 365 Financials future versions are going to support. It is a little bit different than our current security model. All right. So this is the slide where I just say this is what they tell us. So the common data model is optimized. That concept of the fabric and elasticity of the data store provides for optimization. But this is where they've learned Microsoft's best practices and past experience have determined that they will take things and not denormalize data stores within the common data model. A great example is if you have any CRM many-to-many relationships, and again, I'm more CRM based, so that's why I apologize for using CRM as an example all the time. Oftentimes, those relationships are best stored as non-normalized in a data warehouse or a common data model environment with the referential keys creating the references as we need them. That's kind of techy, but apparently it works much better for searches and building out parent-child relationships. Additive design. So we talked about this, I've mentioned this a few times. By additive design, the concept here is that when we want to add something new to an application, we add something new. I have long been a fan of reusing fields in CRM as part of XRM build-outs. We never ever use, certain fields. So you know what, let's replace that field with, we're going to use that field for something else, and we're just going to change the label so it shows up in all of our entities as, favorite color. But really the field is listed as, location or whatever it may be, address to zip code, whatever it may be. That is not how we want to work in the future. And the reason being is we've done that historically to keep the databases from getting sizable. As we've created new, functionality for, businesses, we've added, a new, a warehousing functionality onto our, our financial product, and we've had to go out and keep track of more detailed, color, size matrices and stuff like that. We've gone out and reused fields that may have existed already because they're similar, they make sense, and they're empty right now. Why keep adding and expanding the field, taking up space and resources on the system? Microsoft has now made a change to how this works. And what they do now is, the concept is don't reuse something that's out there. If it's exists and is empty, the system's intelligence is going to build over time and know that when I go through my processes, I have never ever put something in, wife's name field in a contact. It's not something our business does. We don't track that. Then it will ignore that. So instead of reusing that field, the additive design concept is that I just go and add the fields I need. I go and add, parents, sibling, to contacts. In an account, I will put in, a new lookup or a new field for, parent company, sister company, whatever it is. I won't reuse something that exists already. And that way I keep my data store pristine, and that structured XML and all of that consumable information is always the same. Now what that does give me is a data dictionary that has a lot of empty fields in it. But the great thing is that the optimization of the structure, star and snowflake design of hanging things off the parent, or by using secondary entities and fields, is the system is going to optimize itself in such a way as not to squander resources on the empty tables or relationships. So basically, the need to repurpose fields is unnecessary. There are, and I've seen some things where you basically can go is when you're displaying the common data model structure, is that unused fields can actually be filtered out of the view so that you're not presented with that useless information. Anyone that's used the toolkits or anything like that to do data dictionaries, there's umpteen hundred fields that are just completely empty. You can filter those out now so you're documenting your systems and building out. You can only see what you're using. It makes it much easier to use. And then finally, we've got data validation and defaulting. So what this gives me is the ability to create validation on data. So I always want to make sure, we'll step back to my example, that if I type in the company name and I say the or a greatcompany.com or a great company Inc., is that I always make sure that information entered in that field is formatted in such a way as that it is company name, comma, space, the. I create that rule once as a data validation or a defaulting function, actually data validation function. That carries across all fields that are tied to that common data model entry. So back to the MSDYN underscore account name in our data structure. If that is enabled as part of the common data model, and I have this rule at the common data model or the common data service layer saying default to this value or this structure, I don't have to go into CRM and write, a little script to do it or a workflow or a plugin to do it. I don't have to go into AX and do a process that's going to go in and fix that. It'll do it automatically. That's the same thing as defaulting. I can make sure that if I type in a zip code, I want to get fancy and do something. Why has CRM never done this? When I type in a zip code 20019, it automatically defaults to Washington, D.C. Stuff like this can be built in as part of your system, and then utilized, and it'll function across all those platforms, not just CRM, not just Dynamics for Financials, but across, Power BI, across your integrations with Excel, integrations with Word, any of the Office products, all of the third-party products that now tie in with Flow and stuff like that. The common data model becomes a consumable for anything that you want to hang off of it. Creation of mandatory fields. If we can set those mandatory fields, sorry about that, and have those carry across the entire organization. And finally, the encryption model. So one of the things people have always wondered about, and this is, is one of the concerns of the cloud itself, is how do I ensure that my data is not being looked at, sniffed, snagged, or surplaced or utilized? And what Microsoft uses is its at-rest data encryption, and that's a transparent data model, encryption model, where it encrypts each page of the database before writing it to disk, and then it sends it across encrypted, and it's read at the client layer. What it does is, by doing this, it takes a number of precautions to help secure the database, encrypts confidential assets. There's actually a firewall around the database server, so we don't have people hacking into it that way. This also keeps us from having the data stolen, in the sense that if we somehow or another collect data from the common data model, and also the applications that support it, 365, some of the Office apps, if someone does happen to capture that data, they cannot simply restore that somewhere else and read it, because that encryption key is at the server side. So without that encryption key, which is on the server, they can't read the data. That's not to say it can't happen. It's just not easy. So this actually happens at the SQL data and log files. So it's not even reading the data pieces itself, but the actual bits and bytes at the actual SQL store. All right. There's a lot more coming on, and there's some white papers out about the common data model and common data service and its security functions. All right. So now let's talk about how the common data model is going to help us. So for number one thing is it's going to let us build business apps fast. So if we are using, in our organization, we have both Dynamics for field service and we have Dynamics for financials. And we need to be able to do things such as build out an immediate approval app so that we want to make sure that when Technician Henry goes out to organization X and provides a service at that point in time, I don't want to wait until the end of the week to bill. I want to bill at that moment in time. I can build quick little apps, a PowerApp app that'll take that information, immediately take the information out of CRM's field service piece, throw it into the financial piece, and at the same time possibly, pop an invoice out on a SharePoint site for the client to read or notification. These are all business apps. In the past, XRM has been based on building line of business applications. We can now build those much quicker. And the great thing is we're going to do it by empowering the power users to do it. And this is a sad thing for the world of consultants, but the great thing is there's so much more we can do. There's a lot more for consultants to do, but a lot of the rudimentary things in the past that a consultant would have to be brought in to do, an organization's power users, the tinkering owner who likes to play around with things, whomever, it can go in and start to do some of these things themselves. And the great thing with the Office 365 environment and Dynamics Online and stuff like that is you can do it in your sandboxes, play with it before you go and actually put it in production. It allows you to start self-fulfilling and self-supporting your own organization a little more. That is not to say that things that are complex do not need to be handled by skilled people, because we can all build something that's going to float in the water, but sometimes we build flat little rafts that float on the stream instead of building really quick sailboats. So you need a sailboat, find a sailboat builder, and that's where the development comes in. So CDM provides the developers with a much more efficient process too. All of these tools now, there's an SDK that the CDM supports. They're all now available for us in a common function or common application, so we can build code. And the great thing is most things that we build now should be built if we follow the standards of the CDM, the various application SDKs, and just the Microsoft .NET framework and stuff like that. Is I should be able to hand off someone else an application that I've written, and they should be able to pick right up on it and be able to follow it. Commonality. And then the bottom line is the great thing is your data is now connected across everything. It's either connected across the common data model. Those are the things within the Microsoft stack. Dynamics 365 for sales, field service, Dynamics for financials, Flow, whatever it may be. And then there's also connectors and gateways to connect us out to other things. My Salesforce.com system is not doing as well as it used to, so I'm going to leave my old SF.com system up, and I'm going to pull the data over live as I need to into CRM as I need to. So an opportunity is created in Salesforce, but I want to now track that in CRM because it's much more robust and powerful. I can use a connector from Salesforce to CRM to pull that data across. I'm not having to go out and engage, some of the more expensive and higher powered products. And I'm not saying that there's no longer a need for things like Scribe and stuff like that. In fact, there is probably more of a need now for them for more complex functionality, but less of a need for off-the-shelf simplicity. All right. This is just a real quick concept of across all things, that common data structure. This is across the common data model and all of the Dynamics 365 applications. That structure is basically entity, attribute, a relationship, options, and option sets. This is pretty standard. This is the meta-driven architecture that provides the ability for all of the systems to work together. This is mimicked up to the common data model. All right. Some of the common entities in the common data model, the foundational entities, those are all of those proprietary property entities I talked about, as well as addresses and currency, things that do not often change at the organization level. There's then a grouping for persons, organizations, and groups. And you'll notice these are broken into these little groups of workers. Those are the users, Dynamics 365 financial users, Office 365 users, CRM users, team members, vendors, tenants, fans, alumni, and families. It's really interesting here that we don't have one. It's just called customers. The reason being is they have actually defined that as an entity that exists. It's anything can be a customer. Or your tenants, your fans. Fans and alumni, they were built out for some specific applications. And there's some things to be said about the common data model. There are standards for common data modeling in both the federal government as well as certain industries. Healthcare industry has a specific common data model structure that Microsoft is being very aware of what's being put out by specific verticals and industries, and they're working with those and understanding what they're doing so that as they build out their common data model group structures, they are building out the entities to match those requirements. All right. All right. So real quick, where is it right now? So the current state of the common data store is it doesn't exist. So right now, anyone using Office 365, Dynamics 365 for sales, and Dynamics 365 for AX, there is not any common data model right now. You may have common data fields in your structure. So we have MSDYN account name in both the Exapta table, and we have the MSDYN underscore account name in the CRM tables, but there's nothing pushing data between those, and there's no common data store with that. This is all coming. So right now, we still need to use things like Smart Connect Scribe, the Dynamics connector to push data back and forth. An account is an account in CRM, and an account is a different entity and different piece of data structure in the financial system. That's not to say it's not changing. As we move forward, we can right now turn on, with a subscription to the common data model as part of Office 365, we can turn on data replication between the different systems. And we'll show that at the end of this session, a real quick little example of that, of how we can do that. So we can start doing this now. So what will happen is, by us turning on the common data model functionality in CRM and subscribing to that subscription, we will then have a master data store, the common data model, and the common data service that contains the exact same account information that is replicated then between AX and GP, AX and CRM, whatever it may be, but it's always kept in common based on those rules we define. We can create those ad hoc. It takes away the need to do things such as, pushing, a new account out to, if I close a deal in CRM, let's push the account into AX if it doesn't exist. I can do that using Flow and the common data model. Once I've set up that relationship, based on the rules I say, if someone makes a change to that company name in Dynamics AX, that'll push back to CRM if we say that that's the appropriate process. That common data model record stays the same, or it continues to keep that continuity. Where we're going with all of this, at some point in time in the near future, we will start to see, and I've tried to show it by the color blocks here, that now our lead is, a lead exists in all different places by the different colors. Master data model, we have the accounts, we have the products, and we have orders. We have the secondary data, and how it's consumed is based on what we built out in our system. So we have AX and CRM. So AX is going to say that we need to find the items for bill of material and invoicing. It will pull from its data store where the records are maintained in the CDM and commonality and utilize that information. But at the same time, from CRM, I may want to see the bill of materials because someone's calling the service line and saying, hey, listen, I didn't get all the pieces to this product that I was supposed to get. We can pull up that same record, and it's pulling the same common data. So it's not pushed data from CRM to AX or AX calling a web service or CRM calling a web service that pulls up the AX data in a frame or anything like that. It's actually the same data that's kept in sync by the common data model. I don't have to maintain this. I don't have to write any kind of processes. As a record is updated, if it is published to the common data model, it will update across all of the related systems, the applications. That includes PowerApps, Flow, third-party applications such as Box, Tinder, Facebook, whatever it may be. And just taking a look at the chat line. And let's see. So here's basically what with the common data model coming, something that we need to start doing right now. And that is very important. We should start standardizing on formats for fields and stuff like that. Knowing that at some point in time there'll be commonality across all systems. If we're going to call something an organization name, let's keep that standard across everything. Company is organization name going forward, whatever it may be. Dynamic CRM calls everything an account. You'll start to see that change because I believe that one of the first things we're going to see is that the company name or the account is going to change to some other name or title. Do not repurpose fields. So if we're currently building out a system in our system, let's make sure that we don't repurpose the field. If we need to add hat size, let's add a new field for hat size. Knowing that the systems right now, as they exist, Dynamics 365, for sales, field service, and projects, as well as Dynamics 365 for financials and for business, I might be wrong on that term there, are all utilizing this functionality whereby unused fields are not consuming resources in the system. And then for the last thing, CDM is something that I work with a lot of developers, and CDM, everyone's getting all hot and heavy to either use it or they hate the idea. One of the things I've noticed is if you start to show people what the common data model is all about, it makes sense to developers because it makes it easier for them to do their work, knowing that where information is and where it's coming from, that they'll start to buy into it quicker than if you force it upon them. And lastly, so the adaptability of business processes, one of the great things the common data model and common data service is going to give us is the ability to adapt and change things as we go. Right now we have our Dynamics business apps. We have our productivity applications, Microsoft Office, dashboards, and anyone who's using Office 365 will notice more and more functionalities coming every day, literally, to those services. And you'll start to see some of that functionality is actually crossover. The teams, group sites, and stuff like that, they're across the whole platform, both the business app side and the productivity side. And that's part of that whole unification model that Microsoft is going through. And then there's the third-party apps. Microsoft App Source. Great place to go out and find applications from authorized vendors, third parties, and partners of Microsoft that may take some functionality you need already or that you need and provide it out there. There's some really cool free stuff out there too. But don't go bogging down your system with lots of freebie stuff. And then external data sources. So we can now take our business processes and adapt them across all three of these areas. We can take our productivity tools and tie them in with our business apps and tie them with our third-party apps, all using this common data model and common data flow. by utilizing either Microsoft Flow, PowerApps, business processes within applications, or just the data of the common data model. It's through all of these things that we can do a lot of really cool stuff. All right. And how these all work is our Office ties into our Dynamics products. And then in the background, we have connectors or gateways. Again, connectors connect to internal Dynamics products. Gateways and connectors connect to external products, Salesforce.com, Oracle data stores. And I'll show you there's a bunch of things out there that we can tie into. Real quick, AppSource is a place to go out. It used to be called Microsoft Marketplace, Pinpoint, a bunch of different names. It's now part of the Office 365 functionality. It gives us the ability to pull in all kinds of different products. It also allows us to utilize other functionalities of Microsoft within things, such as Cortana Intelligence. This is that whole, computer learning or artificial intelligence stuff that's out there. It's all available through AppSource. We're running kind of time. Here's some examples of different products that are available for CRM. I'm going to skip through this real quick. Data sources and AppSource, here's a small sample, but if you notice, it's not just the Microsoft stack. It's some of the competitors as well. And there are a lot of people buying into the PowerApps application. I think there's a lot of organizations that realize it's better to work with Microsoft than work against them. A great piece of the product is your ability to create your own app solutions. As part of the Microsoft Unification, you'll notice that your sitemaps now leads you to something called Cloud Director, which allows you to create your own internal applications for your business and put them within the Dynamics 365 UI so that you don't have to have people jumping around to try and find things. As a quick example, I'm going to probably jump quick here. And we'll talk about Microsoft Flow. So Microsoft Flow provides us with a bunch of templates and stuff like that to create some really quick and easy things. And I'm going to jump off the demonstration here and actually go into Microsoft Flow. But an example here would be to send out tweets, to utilize MailChimp. One of the great things to do is a lot of Microsoft Flow applications integrations are probably going to be coming into some other products such as Quick Dimensions and some of your payroll products and stuff like that for AX and things like that. So let's just take a jump real quick into PowerApps. So we're going to take a quick look at our Flow. So basically, based on our services and organization, we only have 2 minutes left, we could go out and look at all the different services that Flow supports. Now, anything listed as a premium is something you have to pay for. Anything that's not listed as a premium is something you don't have to pay for. So we can create, from in CRM, we can create Outlook tasks automatically from, other things. One of the things I use all the time is Twilo. And the demo I was going to show, but we're actually running out of time here, was actually me pulling an approval from the close of a sale in AX or in CRM, close of a deal, sending an SMS message out to a person saying that thank you for your order, will be placed soon. And at the same time, that same Twilo account, so I'm only using one application, going out to AX, from AX once the order ships and sending a shipping notification with the FedEx tracking number on it. FedEx provides a link within Flow that you can pull the tracking numbers. UPS provides one. Those are all at costs. There's some third-party ones that allow for other things. Great thing about Flow is there's lots of templates already built. So some within Dynamics, some within CRM. And you'll see there's ties in all different types of products. Here's one for add notes to CRM contact based on a phone call or any other entity. All right. And basically, this is just a very simplified document, a piece of information. I go and pick the organization I want to use. There it is. And this will know your organization, so you don't have to go through this. And you can create your different conditions and so on and so forth. Very, very powerful. At this point in time, we're about a minute over, so I'm going to drop back and start answering some questions.
All right, great. Thanks, Henry. So several questions have come in.
Yeah, I've not seen them, so I was just trying to look at them.
Yeah, so let me, they've been kind of coming in steadily throughout the event, and if you have time to stay, that'd be great.
Yeah,
Should we just dive in?
I can stay as long as you need to, so.
All right, excellent. So let's see here. So to integrate the CDS with external systems, like for example Salesforce, does Microsoft allow us to extend the CDS, and if so, do we need to use Flow and PowerApps or just REST custom services?
So the common data service, when you subscribe to it and you start utilizing it, and again, right now it's something you subscribe to, it's yours. You can add to it. So it's that additive concept. You can add things to the currently existing model or piece information and data structure, and that's yours, and you can use that externally. I think the question comes up as to how Microsoft handles the licensing, because historically, if I consume data from within CRM or AX as an external product, like I posted to a website or I post out to a third party, I need to either have a integration license or some kind of licensing on it. That is still constrained based on licensing, so you can't repurpose data from the common data model out to a non-licensed user, and it's the same as all the CRM products. AD user equals a licensed user, but you can do things like share data on SharePoint and some of the other socialized sites without consuming an internal license. There's some questions on that really should be clarified either by your, well, here's the thing. When you go to do something like that, if it's something where you need additional licensing or you may be exposing yourself to a licensing risk, both Flow and PowerApps are going to tell you that this process may require additional licensing for external data consumption. And then basically it opens up a trouble ticket in Office 365 and you get a phone call in 2 hours from someone from Microsoft and you explain your situation and they tell you yes or no to it. It's very holistic right now as to how that's being handled. As of 2 months ago, the common data model was free. Now you need to have a minimum license, and I think that's one of the reasons. Hopefully that answered the question.
Question about where does security lie? Does it lie on the client apps?
Security relies at the server level.
Okay.
And that's all part of that REST-based security model. It's very complex, but the data is encrypted, passed out. A person that is connected to the common data model or any of the application data stores, they have a server-side token assigned to them at the client side that they consume as part of your login credentials when you sign on with your sign-in. If you don't have that exact same token credential as the server, you don't have access to the data. So that's where someone can't suck the data in the middle, from the pipe in the middle and try and open it up because they don't have that endpoint token.
So there are a couple questions about, I guess you kind of categorize them as data integrity, some of the kind of common integration challenges. One's asking about sort of how do you handle mapping For example, if a country is the United States in one system and USA in another system, and then sort of similar is how do you notify users when there's attempts to synchronize, but the record violated some data validation rules.
So as we integrate the common data model, one of the things we can create is that data modeling function structure. And the data modeling set, once we do this in, and it's actually, if you look at my screen, I think I'm still sharing, it's concept, it's very similar to this, the concept of how I create the, let me go back in here.
Hey, Henry, move that. There's like a window in the middle.
I'm getting rid of the box.
All right.
So basically, within that that data modeling, so we've now turned on the common data model, but we already have Dynamics 365 for financials and Dynamics 365 for field service, and we're a multinational organization. And historically, we've not utilized, the state field or the country field correctly. We've used either, acronyms or whatever it is, but we want to standardize. We can build into a process, much like you would with a lot of the other third-party tools now, as part of the common data models functionality, a data normalization piece. So if it is not, USA equals US, once I put that, or United States of America equals USA, if data coming from any system comes over as USA, change it to United States of America, and then now replicate out across all of the systems. So it'll self-correct across everything. But again, those are rules you can put in place. For in the meantime, you can actually say, because I have these different data pieces, I want to have a common data model build, but I want my point of record being CRM, because I've gone out and done some cool stuff that when I type in a zip code, automatically fills the correct city, state, and country, and I don't have to worry about that being wrong. So by default, data coming from CRM, update the common data model with the city, state, and country. Information coming from a financial package or maybe my website or third-party products. If there's not that data validation, don't bring it in, or bring it into a secondary field and correct.
I'm just looking through the questions here.
Yeah, can I see those? Can I show those on my screen?
Yeah, you should be able to. So if you go all the way to the right there, you should be a down arrow, and then you can bring up the Q&A block.
Oh, there it is.
And there's one suggestion here asking for a follow-up demo showing examples of flow. That might be a good idea for maybe a next webcast. Will Azure subscriptions like Azure ML be able to connect to the data store? It's an interesting one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So anything in Azure, including, so one of the great things is Flow and PowerApps, and all these things are going to be able to utilize a number of the Azure functionalities, including the Azure work processes. I mean, many things that are available in Azure are consumables. They actually do require, that's licensing on Azure side. The great thing is you can go out and play with a lot of this stuff. Just go into 365 and give yourself a common data model trial license for 30 days and do the same thing with, some of the Azure tools that you may be thinking of using, and you can play with it. And if you have, an Office or Dynamics 365 full-on subscription, you can use your sandbox environments to play with this stuff.
There's a question, can you describe behavioral modeling? Sorry, can you describe an example of it?
Behavioral modeling. Well, a great example would be what we just talked about with if we're thinking I'm talking about the same thing, the data store, common data model behavioral modeling would be that typing in USA automatically enters the value of United States. So I can create behavioral things such as almost like shortcuts that I know that certain behaviors will create certain activities, if that's the correct concept that we're using there.
And the only other question I see right now is just asking a little more about performance and anything else that can impact. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly what point you were at when this was asked, but does anything else impact performance?
Okay, so I think this probably gets back to the point of the empty data. We have 10,000 fields that we never use. So the great thing is all of this all uses Azure SQL and functionality, as well as Azure binary large objects. And the way the Azure data stores in the cloud have been created is that it provides for learned experience, I guess is the word. It's not what we're looking for, but the system learns based on utilization of your system, what not to worry about and what to worry about. So we get in the system into areas where it avoids using empty database. Empty data fields are not included in queries. So the first thing is we do a fast search, and we may have certain fields listed as part of what we have in a criteria, but those fields are empty. The search will not even look at those fields because the first thing it does is checks to make sure there's any data in there. Additional things, how does this affect performance? So the common data model should not affect your actual performance. A lot of people would think that if I have something that's keeping my records in sync, much like I was using Scribe or a connector or SSIS jobs, is that somehow it would be hit on performance. But it's not, because everything's occurring at the database level across the cloud servers. So it's not affecting your front-end application services, nor your async services or other services on the CRM side. It's all happening in the back end in Azure. And that goes towards the concept of the elasticity and the whole, Azure database. So it should not affect performance. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Right now, I know if I'm running a link section and I try to run Flow, it gets a little slow because I think I'm using the same pipe across Microsoft. But I just think that's because my system is not, I'm not on an enterprise level system. I'm using my small company system or whatever it may be.
Okay, I think that was the last question that we have here. Yeah, I marked the ones that we've already answered. So I think we can begin wrapping up, Henry.
Great. So one thing, I did see the word REST in the system. Everything the common data model does and is doing is going to be OData compliant. That's where everything's going. OData seems to be the way, Microsoft in the world is going with data consumption and integration. And I mentioned earlier real quick this concept of virtual entities coming in the future. All of that's going to rely on OData. So if we're looking at what we're doing in the future and consumption and stuff like that, any outside application or any other system outside that can either consume OData or be consumed as OData, I can use in Flow or AppSource. As long as I have connection to security rights, they are 100% available to me in that. So a system that I've never heard of, Bob's Big Burger, shipping system that I want to connect to because that's my client. If they have OData connectivity, I can utilize that and put that into my business processes.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate the folks who have asked questions and even the suggestions.
So I did see one last one here.
Okay.
I think I should clarify.
So
CDM is now CDS's future. So CDS, the Common Data Service, is the wrapper. The Common Data Model is only a piece of it. So the data integrity, the Common Data Service includes the Common Data Model, the import-export functionality, integration pieces that are just consumed by Flow and other products, the security model, and other things. So that Common Data Service is Microsoft's, hey world, here's what we're allowing you to connect to our environments with. Anything on the cloud and on-premise right now, or as will soon be called local, we can pull. The CDM is just a piece of that. Now, CDM is constantly growing. Right now, it does not exist in place when I have my Office 365 and Dynamics 365 applications. The common data model is not engaged, and it's not syncing data between things and creating that holistic, one point for all data. That has to be turned on. But slowly as we move forward, more and more things, each release, the next release of AX and CRM, there's going to be a lot more MSDYN_X fields, which are going to have automatically flagged for common data model usage if I turn on. Hopefully that helped.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'm just personally interested to see is as Microsoft adds more related Dynamics 365 applications that aren't sort of the core operations, core CRM related apps, those will be built natively, some of them at least, on CDS, and that will, I think, I've written about this a little bit, but I think those will likely draw Dynamics customers further into the use of CDS, even if they don't realize it, or they don't even have to realize it.
Agreed. Yeah, that's where everything's going. CDS is the whole part of it, and the CDM being part of it, but everything is developed in CDS, and you see that right now. And part of the unification is that you have the common Dynamics landing pages now, your cloud director and other things, putting it all in the same place. So.
Great. Well, let's see if there's anything else here. So there's a question about tenants. Do you want to try to take that one? When using CDS between operations and sales, for example, do you have to locate them inside the same tenant? If not,
No, you do not. So
do
long
not.
as they're within the same license subscription, you do not. And you can have multiple tenants. So one of the examples we run right now is that we have, for one of the organization we did some work for, there was like 13 tenants, 12 tenants. They only used 3 of them, but we needed to be able to link data between all those different tenants. And so long as they were published out through, I'm still sharing my screen, so I'll give a quick look. They're consumable as a service through Flow, meaning I have a license to those systems. Henry McCallum at Dynamic Azure can connect to those organizations. I can consume any tenant.
Yeah, that is interesting. I actually thought you were going to say the opposite. So that's a very interesting point to know.
Nope. The idea is too, you can go cross tenant. It's so your CDM exists at the top level of your O365 Active Directory as your Active Directory container. So consider it much like your internal network. It exists at the very top level. You can have multiple child branches below that. And that's part of that security model that they build out. So right now when I look at here, if you look at my screen, I'm only showing my Dynamics Azure tenant, but I may have another one. And guess what? I can add a custom one. So maybe I don't have it listed in my connectivities, but I want to connect to, Henry's demo.crm.dynamics.com, and I have those credentials. I can do it.
Well, Henry, we're getting some really good feedback from this event. I think I hope we can have you back for another one real soon.
Yeah, I definitely
I got some ideas to even propose to you. Yeah.
So the flow, I've done this my second time, and every time I get to the flow thing, and it doesn't get to that point, because I think flow and PowerApps really need to be talked about as a side. But the idea is to keep in mind that that's how we tie all this stuff together right now, and more of it's tying together automatically. I mean, every day you get a new Office 365, hey, new function. Now your tasks go into your calendar, go into your CRM, and they're constantly building stuff that's in there. And this is all based on that CDS. And the great thing is you can shut stuff off. If there's stuff you don't like, there is probably a way to shut it off.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there.
I appreciate everyone's time, and thank you for the opportunity. And hopefully we'll have another session soon.
Yeah, please look for the surveys as you leave. If you give any additional feedback, we always appreciate it. I know Henry would appreciate it too. So we'll end it there. We'll be sharing a recording pretty soon as well, so look for an email on that. So with that, Henry, thanks once again.
Thank you
and
very
that
much.
concludes today's event. Bye, everyone.